So, welcome to another episode of Coming to Your Senses, where we talk about navigating the labyrinth of the mind and how we can emerge victorious from that. And today I'm joined by Dr. Indra. Now, we met, believe it or not, it was 6 years ago. I know, 6 years ago. And it was because I had become very ill from a very large fibroid that had impacted my internal organs because of the size of it, was blocking the function of various things, and most specifically my kidneys. And what I noticed from my experience within the healthcare system that I was in, which is UK, so NHS, is that each time I asked, well, what could I be doing? I was met with kind of blank stares. And then I happened to go to a friend of mine's clinic who he offers various health talks, and you were doing a health talk. And I was at the end of it, I was like, I need to go and speak to this lady, and I need to go and see this lady to see if I can get some insights into what's going on for me and what I could be doing. So I can't believe that's 6 years ago. And what I'm really fascinated with is your journey, not only since then, but also pre then. And what I'd love to start off with, other than welcoming you and thank you for sharing your time with us today, is asking you to share a time in your life where you came to your senses, what specifically that was, and therefore then what that led you to.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, Jules. I can't believe it's 6 years and time flies, isn't it? And so much has happened in that period of time. So when I think about the question of when I came to my senses, I'm sure there's lots of little things that have happened, but I think in terms of the biggest time when there was a big light bulb moment was probably about 8 to 10 years ago. I was actually lying on a hospital bed and being investigated for chest pain. And the doctor said, you know what, we're going to take this really seriously. You're going to have to go through some investigations. And I made a decision at that point, no, I'm not ready to be ill at the age in my 40s, and I need to find out a different way. Pre this particular episode, when I had that final kind of, right, I need to do something different here, was working in a GP practice and just thinking, I went into medicine from here, from my heart. I knew that I didn't even know when I decided to be a medic, but I knew that was what I had to do. That was my service, as I now know the word to be, service to what I needed to do for me and the authentic me. But when I was going through this period of time, I was like, maybe medicine wasn't the right thing. And I was having a bit of a crisis. And then, your body then tells you, you know what, you're going to have to stop. And that's what ended to be up on that bed. And even at that point, I was saying, oh, they're just going to say it's stress. Don't worry about it. You're just being you're not being strong enough. Get on with it. And when they said, you know what, you're going to have to stay here for 12 hours, we're going to do some extra tests on you, it just went, right, something has to change. So that was my biggest coming to my senses, lying on that hospital bed going, something isn't right here. Something quite imbalance here. And these are the words that through my journey from that point to where I am now, I realize what that was trying to tell me. And with the work that I do, you also then realize that people have to sometimes go through something like this to actually come out of it. It feels like like I think somebody described to me like a cocoon and a butterfly. You're a bit of and then you come out and you're like, that's the direction that I needed to go down. So that's my biggest coming to my senses.
I think it's one of those. Very often, I think it's a health thing. Because I think most of us ignore our health until it becomes some level of crisis level. And I wouldn't say that. I think I was already starting to be aware of my health a few years before I became really ill. However, I think that most of it was very external driven. to do with my weight or how I looked, or if there was something, awry with my nails or my hair, or it was very external driven. So I think, when I suddenly had this whole, your kidneys are failing, it's quite and we take for granted so much all of what's going on internally, that it is, until something goes wrong, that it is like a smack in the face. What? Go on.
No, I was just going to say, this is the thing that I'm seeing with the people that I'm working with, is that actually there's this kind of there's like a infinity sign that's happening, where your body is giving you signs, your mind is giving you signs, and it's what actually ends up being the strongest thing, whether it's your mental health or your physical health, but they're always interlinked together. And this is what I say to a lot of my people that I work with, is that, these physical signs that we're all taking for granted, like a little bit of this or a little bit of that, are actually love letters from our body, explaining and giving us little signs to say, you know what, nothing's massively out of balance, but if you continue, this will happen. So that's the kind of, when you say that we don't really listen, probably we haven't been educated to listen. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that's the point, and I think from my perspective, making that switch from seeing things as very isolated incidences, whether it's a headache or whether it's a little bit of sickness, or seeing them as isolated things. And I think that was the thing that I found really fascinating working with you, is that initial questionnaire. I mean, I don't know how long it took me to complete it, because it's a kind of a mammoth questionnaire. And it's sort of questions that part of my thinking kept going into, well, what's the point in asking about this? Because that happened years ago. And then coming to see you, having got that collection of information, I think that's the thing that I found fascinating, is that most of the other medical professionals that I'd interacted with were looking at isolated things, and especially those that were, obviously I was dealing with a gynecologist, I was dealing with a urologist, I was dealing with about 3 or 4 different other consultants. So they all had their specialism, and they knew that particular thing really, really well. And yet there wasn't anyone taking a holistic view of how those all things, and sometimes they weren't even conversing with each other, let alone conversing with each other with me in the room. And I think that's the thing I found fascinating about the session that I had with you, was all of a sudden there was a lot of pieces of the puzzle that were coming together. Can you tell me a bit more about, because obviously you've got both sides of that, from working in GP practice to now being a functional medicine doctor, how that actually works?
Yeah, and I think this is the key thing that shifted for me when leaving that hospital bed and then seeing I need to look at something else. I started investigating lots of different ways of working. I even left medicine and did a bit of interior design type work.
Oh, wow.
Like, oh, maybe that's it. One of the biggest lessons or one of the biggest insights that I've had, which makes us different, well, this is what I feel makes our group different, is that we see our humans as whole and not broken.
Mm.
And if we see our humans that we're working with as whole and not broken, it's such a relief. It doesn't mean nobody needs to be fixing anything. And the reason behind that is because our body has innate intelligence within it. So actually, everything is interlinked. What's happening up here is probably affecting here, it's probably affecting here. And that, I think, is the beauty of a functional medicine, holistic, integrative approach, whatever word you want to look at. And when we take our history, I know the questionnaires are very long, but it means that we have an understanding of how your body works and how your body has actually interacted with the world around you at that point. It gives us clues. It gives us clues to understand what's happening with your immune system, what's happening with your gut, what's happening with your muscles, what's happening with your digestive system. All of these things are interrelated together. And when we take that timeline, which starts at birth or even before birth, depending on how much information you have, one of the things that we learn is how everything is interrelated. So when we retell your story, it becomes like a little bit magic in the sense, oh, okay, oh, okay. And it just makes, in a way, it takes that pressure off people to say, I need to do something. It's all right. Your body's doing it. Look how amazing your body has already done what it needs to do. Um, and that's I think the beauty of what we're doing is that interconnection. And I think the difference really has come through research.
Mm.
This information was there, it's just how we're putting it all together. And also, there's more research coming out about the interconnectedness of what happened at birth and your early antibiotics and the effect on the gut that it has, and then what the effect on the gut and how that affects your immune system, and how your immune system then creates some of the symptoms that you're experiencing, and how that affects your nervous system, and how the nervous system then creates more symptoms. You can start to see the kind of flow that happens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes loads of sense. And it kind of goes back to the point that you made earlier about that we're not taught to anything around that of understanding it. And the one, I think we're not taught our innate health.
Yes.
And I think it's very easy to forget. I was talking with a client last week about how the innate well-being that we all have. And we were talking about how magical things are and how magical things happen without us having to do too much. And she was pushing back, and I said, well, when was the last, she had a blaster on her finger, and I said, when was the last time you sat down and you created a plan for how that was going to come back together and the cut was going to heal? And she started laughing at me, and I said, well, is that not magic?
Yeah.
That, you've cut your finger, you've put a plaster on it, protect it from the outside world, but actually the body then just gets on and does what it needs to do.
Yeah. And
And
that's exactly it. I mean, I also describe it in terms of like your heart beating. Well, yes, you can start to say about the chemicals moving in and out and the electrical signals and all the rest of it. But then what does that? And when you see mitochondria, which is the little parts of your energy production in your cells, there's like this little whirlpool cyclone thing that sits in it. What? Like what? How does that even do that? We're not looking at it going, keep moving, keep moving, keep moving. It just does it. So there's
Mm,
so much within us. And, as you said, with the cut or your innate immune system, when it sees an infection, it knows what to do. We're not going, hello, I've seen an infection. Let's get these cells out and this defense mechanism. So yeah, I totally agree that innate health part of it is so important to healing as well.
so what would you say is that shift in education or shift in information that all of us need in order to be able to experiencing more health?
So, yeah, that's a very big question.
Yeah, you get they should start off at 10.
Oh, everything. I think first of all, just knowing you have innate health and that knowing that you're not broken, and that if we listen, that little voice will always tell us what the next step is. We have that within us, and that can be something really simple, getting really quiet. And because a lot of us, when we were saying that we don't listen to those little symptoms, probably because we're just too busy, too
Mhm.
outside our lives to actually just connect. So maybe just a little bit of quiet time to just connect back in with the essence of us to see what is needed. Because absolutely every single one of my patients already tells me the answer. I don't actually have to do anything. I just need to be that. I sometimes look at it as shining a light.
Mm.
Shine a light on where you are telling me the issue is. And they're like, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. Um, and that's what we need to do. Sometimes just a bit of quiet. I don't know. That's that's what's coming to me today.
Yeah, no, and I think that having a few months back I had a migraine, and I don't get them very often at all. But I think what I noticed in that day that I experienced it was that I struggled a lot to do nothing. And the challenge that I had with it was that I couldn't get comfortable. So normally my go-to if I'm not feeling well is either chuck a movie on or have a snooze or so I'm looking to do something to kind of distract myself from whatever the body is experiencing in that moment. And what I found fascinating and gave me so many insights from having this migraine of the because I couldn't sit and watch anything and I couldn't read and I couldn't go to sleep was just how much discomfort was going on from a thinking perspective, which obviously is then going to
Yeah.
not be great help for the migraine situation. And there was this moment of realization of what would happen if I just was with this and just be with this discomfort. It's not going to last forever. Nothing ever lasts forever. So what would happen if I did that? And it was strange. I don't know how long after I kind of had that full on acceptance that I naturally then fell asleep.
Yeah. I love
And it's just fascinating. I think that point that you're making there of the busyness. And I think one of the other things that I think is missing so often as well is responsibility. And I think that's one thing again I found interesting in our conversation is how much you've just said it, the patients give you the answers. They already know, but they don't hear it or see it for themselves. And that's where we often just need to highlight it and show them. And I think that point of I'm coming to you to fix me is quite a big shift that we need in a society. What's kind of your views on that?
Yeah, and I think I totally when you said that, I'm just like, that's not my role. First of all, you're not broken, so there's nothing to fix. So that isn't my role to tell you what to do. My role is to advise you on what I'm seeing and encourage you to listen to what your body's needing. I've got the science, I've got the research papers, I've got this, that, and the other. But with the functional medicine approach to this, what we're seeing is even the science doesn't fit with the person necessarily sitting in front of us. So we have to tailor it to what you are experiencing. So taking responsibility for your health and acceptance for where you are at this moment. And actually, the word that's coming to me when you were describing your story is curiosity.
Mm,
Let's get curious about why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. Because actually, most illness is actually asking us to stop. Is it doing anything else? No.
it's interesting actually when you think about it in that way, because like your own personal story of being a full-on GP practitioner that was working very long hours and under lots of pressure and then ends up in hospital, it's that point of stop. And when nothing else has our attention, that's when we have to go, okay, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And that's when we have the opportunity then to reassess and make different decisions. What I'm curious about is the the difference between being a GP in an NHS practice and working as a functional medicine doctor. The biggest thing that I noticed was time.
And time I think is a big difference, but also it's the mindset. It's the mindset of curiosity and wanting to make those connections, helping the person sitting there making those connections. We've got a new thing that we've introduced to the practice, which is like a half an hour, it's a half an hour health check. And it's so curious because we do the testing, which is very conventional testing. But what we do is the connections are put together in a little computer program, and then it flashes up what the body is already telling us. So we only have half an hour, which is obviously still more than what you get in the NHS. But that is already telling us, look, your digestion is off, your immune system is off. And we flip the consultation and say, well, this is what your body is telling us. Does that match what you're experiencing?
Right.
So it's kind of flipping it a little bit. So we're not taking a history, but this is what the testing is telling us. And people are like, oh, I can't hide, can I? I can't say that I'm okay. And, I'm not under any stress and I'm not under anything like that. And then when you're going to dive into it. So time is biggest component, I think biggest difference. But I think it's also the way we approach the person sitting in front of us. It's a sense of curiosity. It's a sense of how can we help you in this moment in time? Even if we only have 20 minutes with them, how can we move them forward just by that little bit? And that's the way I approach the person that's sitting in front of me.
And it goes back to to me that point that you made about that, even though the science may be saying X, is it actually matching up with that patient's experience rather than how it's been my experience of previous medical practitioners? It's the other way around. No, you have to fit this model, rather than, okay, well, this is the information that we have, let me talk to and look at you and what's happening for you and your experience of this, and then see where we can go. And I think that's the thing that blows my mind, is that then, like, number of times you've been talking not just about one particular thing, you've been talking about numerous systems, whether it's nervous system or the immune system or the gut system or all these different systems, and how they are naturally designed to work with each other, not against each other. So if something's off, then something's off. It's at that out of that imbalance. I'm just wondering what are those? Are there common things that you notice that people that the smallest of shifts that people could make that can help themselves? That there's some commonalities that need to change.
Before I go on to that, one of the words that's coming up for me now when you're saying that, a lot of what conventional medicine is trying to do is population medicine. We have to treat masses, and what is the most cost-effective way of doing that is what we're doing. So there's nothing wrong with what conventional medicine is doing. It's when you don't fit into that box, that's when the issue arises. And I think when you're asking about what's the commonality between everybody, when we look at our patients, we use something called a matrix to kind of understand how the person is working. And we try to put the history onto one page. And in there, it's kind of, how do you take in your nutrients? How is your immune system working? How you create energy? How you detoxify? How does your body transport everything around it? How does your hormones work? How do you talk? Like, how do different parts of your body talk to each other? And then your structural integrity. What's the lining of your gut like? What's the muscles, joints, tendons, those kind of things. But what sits right in the middle of all of this and above all of your history is your mental, emotional, and spiritual health. That is the commonality that I see in most of the people that we support.
Interesting.
If we're not ready to go there, you tend to find that things don't shift as much as we would expect them to shift. One of the areas related to that is the vagus nerve. And that kind of brings the science into that kind of slightly woo-woo, mental, emotional, spiritual. What does that even look like? And the way I kind of speak about it to my patients is like the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, if people aren't aware, is the kind of the biggest nerve that kind of goes through the whole body. And there are a couple of theories behind how this nerve works and how many branches there are. But it kind of sends you into 3 zones. That's the way I kind of talk about it. And it sends you into the red zone, the yellow zone, or the green zone. And the red zone is when you feel so overwhelmed that you don't know what else you can do. You're just, that's it, life-threatening kind of situation. And physiologically, there's lots of changes that happen based on that. It's basically confronting a bear and playing dead. So everything shuts down. So when people go like that, oh, okay, you might know people that are completely bedbound, severely depressed, can't move, can't do anything. That's probably them being in that zone. And when you're in that zone, you view the world in a particular way because you've just got a red pair of glasses on and everything looks frightening and dangerous. Then we have the yellow zone, which is the sympathetic nervous system. It's that kind of get up and go. It's that constant vigilance of looking and wondering what's going to happen. So being at a yellow light, but not knowing if it's going to go green or it's going to go red. You just like constantly there. And that's that sort of sense of what's the next email going to say? What's the next phone call? What's going to happen tomorrow? What's happened before? It's that thinking. Physiologically, that's you preparing to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. So heart rate changes, blood pressure changes, oxygen saturation changes, digestion changes, salivary secretion changes, muscle blood supply changes. And then you wonder, like, then you start to see that this is all related to some of these symptoms. You get indigestion, you get high blood pressure, you get headaches, you get muscle and neck aches. You're like, oh, okay. And then you're obviously then wearing a yellow pair of glasses. Everything again feels like a threat. You're always trying to figure out what's going on. Then we have the third branch, which is your parasympathetic, which is your vagus nerve, and that gives you the parasympathetic vagus nerve. And that gives you that green zone, which is rest, heal, and digest. I did not physically even realize that you can only rest, heal, and digest in the parasympathetic. So if you are stuck, and this changes how you view the world. Out there is raining, but to me, that's actually really beautiful. But if you're in the yellow zone, you're like, oh no, that's awful, it's grey. How does it change the view of the world that you're living in? And when I explain that to the people I look after, they're like, yeah, I'm yellow or maybe red. Then you begin to understand what that mental, emotional, spiritual effect is. I can slap you on with some supplements. I can tell you to sleep better. I can tell you to eat differently. But if you're sitting in the yellow zone and you can't rest and you can't heal and you're not digesting, how are you going to change how you feel in that moment in time?
I love that. I love that description. And I think that as you're talking, I'm just looking at how many people are in that yellow zone and how many people on a day-to-day basis. And I think that I talk often about, I use the analogy of the water table, and how, especially with the kind of wet winter that we've had in the UK, that it didn't take much for it to rain a little bit for that water table to keep going over and keep going over. And it seems to me that for the last 4 years in particular, our fear table has been raised up to a high level that actually hasn't really gone down. So it's not taking much for people to go into that. And, I love that description of being on that amber light, that yellow light of kind of going, right, okay, what next? What next? What do I need to be prepared for next? And I think that that's where, to me, it seems that I have many, many conversations with clients around that of, seriously, is your life in danger right now? Let's actually look at the fact of what is, which is, it is raining. Anything outside of that, whether it's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, that's your perception. So let's have a conversation. So I love that, just recognizing that, and then recognizing that unless you're in that parasympathetic nervous system of getting that green zone, the rest, heal, and digest is just not going to happen. And that then the impact of that on the rest of the body makes so much sense. There's like loads of light bulbs going off for me. This is really, really cool. Thank you.
This is what I was saying about that interconnectedness.
Yeah.
So if your view of the world changes or you have an insight about something, that automatically changes your physiology and that automatically changes what you're doing. So sometimes, we have to use certain like medications or supplements to try and reduce the inflammatory response. That makes that little shift that allows you to feel a bit better. But if you don't shift what else is going on, it will keep you in that process. You kind of need a bit of both. Some people are saying, and there may be some people out there that are saying that if it shifts completely, you get to green zone, your body probably does a few little miracles and things calm down. But I can't speak to that, but that's the sense of, well, if you're completely in the healing, why would your body need to give you symptoms of anything.
And I think as well. I mean, there's so many questions that have come up now. But I think the infinity symbol that you're using is also that recognition that it's not a, well, if I take this or if I do this one thing, that's it. It's recognizing that it's on the move, especially as women. So I think that being 51 years old and recognizing that things are constantly on the move, that even just using a term like perimenopause or menopause, actually it then gets pushed across to women of a certain age. But actually, every single experience is so individual, based on which zone you might be in, based on how you're living your life, how you've lived your life, all of those different things. And I genuinely think that when my fibroid and everything was, the kidney stuff was going on, I think that inadvertently that gave me a heads up and I was already preparing. And the shifts that happened there, I think, have made this transitional time much easier. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's much easier. But I think regardless of your age and regardless of whether you're a woman or not, it's recognizing that it's a constant or continual check-in. And I don't mean that you have to go to the doctors every single day, but just that awareness and just that quietening down of what does my body need right now.
100%. I think, in functional medicine, we try not to give labels, and we look at each individual symptom. So sometimes that word perimenopause is being used quite a lot at the moment, which is great. It's raising awareness, but it's raising awareness of what these symptoms could potentially be. But actually, as a approach to health, it doesn't matter which age you are. I just want to know about your symptoms. I want to understand where your symptoms are coming from. And part of understanding that is sometimes to be a bit quiet and just see what that means. One of the ways I kind of explain this is like something like a headache could come from so many different things. It could come from your thinking. It could come from being in the red zone at the moment because there's so much going on. It could come from lack of sleep. It could come from nutritional deficiencies. It could come from your mitochondria. It could come from toxins. It could come from so many different things. It could come from your hormones as well, which is part of the perimenopausal picture. But what else is coming up for that? So as a team, we're looking at you as an individual. We're not really bothered where you are on that scale. We want to understand what is actually out of balance for you to express the symptoms that you're expressing.
I think that I think it's a really important point about the labeling. And I think it's a hard balance to walk, especially when the conversation around hormonal changes, full stop, has not really been, it's been this taboo subject. So I think it's very interesting that it's at the forefront at the moment. However, I totally hear you. It's about what's going on for that individual right now, because there could be a combination of different things.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with like the conventional way of using HRT or those kind of things. But again, that's population medicine, so you have to fit into the box. So you just kind of get given what's being recommended. Again, nothing wrong with it, and some people it works really well. But if you haven't looked at everything else, you may not get as good an impact as you would done if you clean up a lot of the other stuff that may be going on as well.
So it always comes back to the whole picture. It always comes back to, let's look at everything rather than just this one symptom that you might be showing up with. So I would love to ask about what habits and practices, what you've kind of intimated a few things as we've gone through, but what would be those habits and practices that you use to navigate life's chaos and find ways to increase your own awareness and clarity? And what would you recommend for other people?
So we have at the bottom of this matrix, we have modifiable lifestyle factors. These are things that we have control over. Other things we probably just don't have a lot of control over. So for me, personally, the biggest journey for me is understanding which zone I'm in. And just recognizing it, today is going to be a yellow zone. Okay, what does that mean for me? And understanding how my body works when it's in the yellow zone, I can then support it with the kind of food that I eat, or maybe some of the supplements that I eat, that I take, or maybe some of the rest that I might put into effect on the days that I know that this is going to be a yellow zone kind of day. Because I'm traveling, I'm going here and there, I'm doing lots of things. So what can I put into place? So my go-to is, and I've never used to be able to do this, but something has shifted recently, but I do a very simple meditation, which allows me to, and the kind of meditation I do is to get to the point where I don't have any thoughts, which is a hard thing to do, but it's actually recognizing that, I just want to be in space. So that's the kind of imagery that I use for myself. What does it feel like to just be in space with nothing? That drops me into my green zone. And the other thing that I go to is hydration. That for me has been a big game shifter in terms of how much fluid I actually need to drink and how that affects my clarity of thinking. And when you're on the go, you probably don't think about it as much as you need to. And the third thing is rest and stopping and not doing anything at all. And just sort of basically, as somebody described it, is like someone on a park bench just looking out into the world. That's the kind of thing that I would do. Try and just sit, watch my garden, just nothing. And that's really, really hard. And it's been a big lesson for me, but I know that that's like a key bit for me in my well-being going forward. And so when I'm thinking about other people, it's about recognizing those 5 modifiable areas: how you sleep, how you move, how you think, how you eat, and the community around you. A lot of us are living in a lot of isolation at the moment. That is really impacting on our health as well. So trying to, and this is what I try to give to the people that I look after, is let's give you a toolkit. Let's figure out what your body needs when it's going through yellow zone, when it's going through a red zone. What is it that you need to have? And so we build up a toolkit for them. So is it that the days that they do that, they have to become really aware that they do go to bed just that little bit earlier, or they maybe have a magnesium salt bath at that point, because that's what's going to help them get through. Awareness, I think, is the key. It's if you know what's in your toolkit and what happens, that's the key to understanding what you need. If it is movement, not necessarily like exercise, going to the gym kind of movement, but maybe it's just following your body and doing a stretch. Like sometimes you know that you just need to like stretch out, don't you? You're just like, what's this about? Or even just putting on a piece of music and just dancing. Maybe that's what some of us need to do. And then nutrition, I think the key thing for a lot of people is, are we actually eating enough vegetables? That's like the basic thing that I'm seeing in most of our people that we look after, because I don't think we actually understand how much nutrition is got by vegetables. And there's lots of, we can have discussions about whether it's veg, whether it's carnivore, whether it's whatever, but we need phytonutrients from somewhere. Whether you take it in supplements or whether you take it in food, you need to get those phytonutrients for your body to work effectively. And then how you think, what we talked about, just understanding which zone you're in. If you recognize that you're in the yellow zone, it automatically drops you to green because you're not frightened. And there's a chap that I've been reading, a chap called Sydney Banks, and he said, what if the world was just not frightened by the experience that they're having? That shifts things. Let's take it from fear to curiosity. How does that work? What does that do to how our body is working? And phone a friend, find somebody to speak to, and that community aspect of it is something that we see in a couple of our clients, and that we try and figure out what we can do to support that side of things. So there's a lot of things I've given there, but yeah.
No, but I think the key thing that I'm hearing, and it's exactly what I say as well, is that I can give you the list of what it is that I do. And I don't do the same thing every single day because my body doesn't need the same thing every single day. But what my body needs might not be what your body needs. And I think that that's what I'm hearing you say is yes, they all can fall under the same things of nutrition and movement and rest, and that, all of those, and the connection, and being aware of what's going on with thinking. But actually, we are still individual. And therefore, for some people, they love going out for a run. Personally, think they're mad, but anyway, because that's not my bag. But chuck some music on, or I deliberately got a dog a few years ago to make sure that I go out for a walk, because otherwise, when it is miserable and rainy, I don't want to. But now I have to. So it's making sure that we do what's right for us from an individual perspective, and I think the awareness is so important. And what I am taking from this conversation is that if we just weren't afraid of getting that information, and the information is, I'm in the red zone, I'm in the yellow zone, or this is a little bit off, or that's a little bit off. All that is information. And from that point of information, it's okay. Then what can I do, or what will I do? What's appropriate for me to do? And not making that wrong. So just having that experience of that and seeing where that takes you. And I think that overarching view of all those different systems and you as an individual and how that can help you, I think is the key thing that I'm hearing. So yes, lots of information. And as you said, rather, I'm sure that there's many different avenues that we could go down. And maybe I'll do another call with you at another point, because there's so many different avenues. And I think that we end up looking for a quick fix rather than looking for the bigger picture that's viable and valuable for us. So thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've got a busy practice, so I really appreciate you taking the time. We will put in the show notes where people can reach out and find your website. But are there any final words that I haven't said that you would like to share?
I think we've talked through quite a lot of the way that I approach the people that I look after. I think I would just say to everybody, let's just get curious. Get curious as to why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And sometimes there isn't really anything to do, but just stop.
And I will leave it with that. Thank you so much, Dr. Indra.
Thank you for having me.